let's do roll call, Mrs. Board.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Here.
Mrs. Black.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Mr. Groom.
Here.
Mrs. Jones.
Here.
Mr. King.
Here.
Mr. Perez.
Here.
Mrs. Faye Robinson.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Thurman.
Here.
Dr. Wingate.
Here.
Mrs. Davis. Ms. Davis. Superintendent Dr. Robertson.
Here.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Need to read the amendments.
Sorry. The removal is item 5, exemplars of excellence.
So moved.
Oh, we have an
Thank you.
addition.
There's two.
Second.
There's two.
Oh, I'm
amendments.
sorry. There's 2. Oh, I'm so sorry. In addition of the, under board matters, item C, request for new positions. Apologies. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mrs. Black.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Mr. Groom. Mr. Groom.
No.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Perez.
Yes.
Mrs. Faye Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman.
Yes.
Dr. Wingate.
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson.
Yes. All right. We will have our pledge meditation from Principal Upton of Woodmore Elementary School. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Robertson, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present at tonight's board meeting. This evening, I've invited two of my leading ladies of our Woodmore third grade team. We have Miss Brianna Hargett and Miss Ilona Carlson, who will be leading us with our meditation and pledge this evening.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Hargett, and this is my teammate and colleague, Ilona Carlson. We teach third grade at Woodmore Elementary. On Monday, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was a man of influential change who led powerful movements to cultivate social and racial justice. It is a difficult task to put into words just how inspiring Dr. King is and was today. We wanted to celebrate the way that our students have accepted King's challenge to be rooted in love, seek justice in all, and promote equity. Our students' actions embody justice through love.
Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." I came to Woodmore Elementary through Teach for America with the vision of bringing justice and equity to the classroom. As I have progressed through these years, I have come to realize that my students already held a deep and innate sense of empathy, which is the bedrock of justice. I have learned about love, joy, and empathy from observing my third grade students' relationships. One student handwrites messages of affirmation, I have one right here she gave me, and encouragement to give to her classmates when they are feeling down. She has brightened my day by slipping a piece of paper into my hand that says, "I appreciate and value you." Today says, "You're kind." When another student's mother was in the hospital, she wrote a note to him that said, "I care about you." After the Chattanooga High School Center for Creative Arts performed at our school, one of my students raised his hand to let a performer know that even though her shoe had fallen off during the performance, her dance was beautiful. Dr. King advocated that change makers seek justice through love. I meet with a group of my students 2 times a month. During this time, I ask them how I can be the best teacher for them. They give me kind and sincere feedback. Sometimes you move too fast and some of our peers are left behind, they tell me. My students advocate for equitable consequences, restorative justice, and rigorous academics with an access point for all students.
In addition to Ms. Carlson's celebrations, I would like to share my small acts for my students that made a large impact in our school. Last Wednesday, I asked my students to find some Wednesday wisdom for a morning meeting and write it down on a note card. I explained to them that it could be a quote that they want to live by, motivation to get through the rest of their week, or just something that really speaks to who they are. As my students were searching and writing their quotes down, I was moved by the quotes that they chose. One of my students chose Dr. King's quote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." A few weeks ago, one of my students noticed that another student in our class was not as fortunate as the others. Unprompted, the next morning, my student walks into class with a brand new outfit and a slightly used pair of Jordans. He wanted his classmate to feel accepted and loved, no matter what his outward appearance showed. He saw beyond that. That day, my student not only impacted his classmate's life, but everyone around him. And I believe that he set the precedent of performing actions that are rooted in love. As always, I am moved and changed through my students' actions each and every day. However, there's just one particular student and circumstance that really struck me deep. Last week, a third grade student that I mentor was in my classroom, checking in with me. This particular student and I share some much common ground. The difference is he is 9 years old and I'm an adult sharing the same heartbreak. So I called him up to my desk to check in with him because he was visibly upset. So he brought his paper up to my desk and on it he wrote, "RIP, bro." When I asked him how he was feeling, he just responded, "I just miss my brother." Unfortunately, I too lost my brother this past summer. We talked about how writing notes to his brother helped him cope with the pain that he feels. I shared with him our unfortunate commonality and said, "Thank you for sharing such a positive way to help me channel my grief." To which he replied, "Thank you for showing up today, even though it was hard." You see, teaching goes beyond just the curriculum. It's making those deep connections with our students that are rooted in love, that enforce powerful change. We cannot do this work that we do every day without the influence of our students who inspire us to live out Dr. King's values.
As we continue to celebrate Dr. King through this week, I feel honored to nurture the sense of justice through love that my students embody. May we continue to cultivate changemakers and advocates. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Thank you.
At this time, would you please stand with me as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. All right, we are going to move into our board member disclaimer statement, and we'll start with Mr. Groen.
Okay, start with you.
Not necessary.
Okay. I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system, and if the board's vote on budget or policies may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and the board's vote may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budget, policies, etc. may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have relatives who work for the school system, and the board's vote on all things may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budget policies, et cetera, may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a family member who works for the school system and that the board's vote on budget policies, etc., may have an effect on my family member's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
I declare that I have a relative who works for the school system and that the board's vote may have an effect on my relative's employment. Even so, I hereby certify that I will cast my vote in the best interest of the school system.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any items to pull?
Yes, I have one.
Okay. Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I just have one. I think it's on the consent agenda because it's first read. It's policy 2.300.
That would be board matters.
Actually,
Is that,
it's under board matters.
it's under board matters?
Mhm.
Okay.
We
I don't
can
have
certainly
one then.
we can certainly discuss it when we get to it.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other items to pull? Man, I like y'all. This is great. Okay. Let's call for the vote.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. A. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. All right, moving on to board matters. Item A, do I have a motion to approve the Old East Lake stormwater easement?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. A. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. Item B, board policies. Since they're first read, we do not have to vote, but we can have discussion for anyone that has questions or comments.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, on this policy 2.300, and all of our policies I've noticed we've gone through and we have, and I heard them say something there a minute ago that Dr. Martin Luther King used the word equitable, but I don't think he ever knew that word. I don't think that word was used back then like it is now. And I just don't understand why we're going through and changing the word equality with equitable and equivalent with equitable. And why are we, if they're the same, if they say they mean basically the same thing, and I know the little illustration of the little boy looking over the fence. I've seen it 1,000 times, but I don't really know what that has to do with this, except that it just is a word that we change for what reason? Is it a state thing or what?
So TISA's going to, sorry, TISA, is going to require us to show how we are letting funds follow students where they go. So a student with a disability, a student that's economically disadvantaged. So I'll turn to Scott on this. The word equivalent, I think, means like equal across, and equitable shows that funds are going to be following students.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, I hadn't thought about the TISA aspect of this, but that's a good point. So equitable is going to address what's necessary. Equivalence of mathematical computation.
Right.
So, and if you think about this through the lens of special ed, it would be equivalent if you just divided all of the dollars that you sent to schools on a per pupil basis and said we're going to spend this much money on a student with intense special needs. That would be equivalent. It would also be in violation of federal law. So as I understand what Dr. Robertson is suggesting here, equitable allows for the fact that maybe you're going to send some more funds where it's necessary to address the operational needs of the system.
But it already says equivalent basis on the need, according to the grade levels and need. I mean, that's already there, so.
It is there, that's true, and I don't know what the rationale was for using equivalent when this was first drafted, equivalent basis according to grade levels and need. because since needs may be different by definition, they wouldn't necessarily be equivalent. To be perfectly honest, this is a policy that was drafted by TSBA forever ago, and I don't really know why they used the word equivalent there. I just don't. In terms of why the change was made to put equitable there, I think Dr. Robertson's reference and the tip of the hat to special ed, I think, is a really good illustration why equivalent maybe isn't what they meant in the first instance.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Robinson?
Well, I will go on record as saying that I have a problem with it constantly being said, because the information I read on the definition of equity is actually advocating part of a critical race theory. And that's my concern, because all of a sudden it's being used. And I've seen the formula for TISA, and I totally agree, because one student might need three additional, well, a base, and then another, and that's all that one student might need. Another student might need three additional things, and I'm all for that. I believe it's our responsibility to provide the opportunity for every child. We can't make the child take the opportunity, but I would like to, since critical race theory is not allowed in Tennessee, I have to ask why TISA is, are they suggesting that we use that word?
No, equity is, I mean, hours-long conversation about this has nothing to do with critical race theory. We're not including critical race theory in our curriculum. Our curriculum's approved by the state. You know, I could take this also back to the conversation about differentiated compensation. Equitable is differentiated. Essentially, what we're saying is that, you know, kids that go to school, they come with different needs. It could be economically disadvantaged. It could be a learning disability. It could be a language issue. And what we're saying here, just like TISA is going to require us to do, is show how those dollars are following students where they go so that we address their needs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Connor?
Yeah, I think we're making something out of nothing. I think we update language as things go on. You know, like, we don't say consumption anymore. We say tuberculosis. We grow up, we change words. I think we're just changing to make it fit better what Scott said. So.
Okay. Any more comments on Board Policy 2.300 or comments on additional policies listed on this agenda, not just any policy?
I would like to, on 2.806, it says may require a contract. Is there a reason why it does not say shall require a contract?
Which line are you, ma'am?
2.806,
Yes.
bids and quotations.
Which line? 27.
And Lindsay, you may want to come up and,
I'm sorry, did you say line 27?
Yes.
So,
I see it.
You see it?
I
Okay.
do.
And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. So this is not a change. That's not a red line version. That maintains our current policy statement. But as I understand, we use our purchase orders in nearly every instance. If we have a supplemental agreement, we'll attach that to the purchase order, but every written authorization that comes from Hamilton County Schools is issued through a purchase order. So if we issue a purchase order, we may not necessarily need to have a separate supplemental written contract that's duly executed. I've misspoken.
No, that's
Okay.
a very accurate way to put it. So from a very technical perspective, a bid that's accepted, if you're making a bid for a pens, you know, a fungible good where you get it from this source or that source, it's the exact same thing. A bid that's accepted is technically a contract.
Okay.
So what this is referring to here is that there may be some contracts for something that's not a fungible good. It may be unique enough that we need to go beyond the bid specs and maybe negotiate some details. So what this policy does is it recognizes in as few words as we can, that you may have some fungible goods where purchase orders form the entirety of the agreement, but there may be some situations where the board is bidding out something, or the purchase office is bidding something out, and we need a contract to describe when will it be delivered. If it doesn't meet our specs, what are our recourses? If something goes very wrong, who bears the responsibility? So this recognizes that some contracts are a little more complicated than others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yep, you're welcome. Mr. Connor, did you have a comment, or is your light just on? Cool. All right. If there are no more comments, we'll move on. Okay. Oh.
No, we're not.
It's not a vote. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, we will need to vote on item C, and we'll vote individually on each position. Do I have a motion to approve item C 1A?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Call for the vote, please.
Was that Mr. Smith?
Yes, it was.
Second.
Yeah.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yep.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
I'm voting yes because most of my principals on it, even though I don't find it necessary, but yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve item B? I'm sorry, item C 1B.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve item C 1C?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
King. Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. And I need a motion to approve item C 1D.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, guys.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Perez?
Yes.
Mrs. Fay Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes.
Dr. Wingate?
Yes.
Chairwoman Robinson?
Yes. Great. Okay, that concludes our agenda session. We'll do a very brief committee update. Mr. or Dr. Wingate, could you give us an update on the policy committee?
Yes, so if you'll look there in the events and announcements, I have scheduled tentatively this boardroom for policy committee meeting on Monday, February the 6th. Also have spoken with Shannon Moody and her team around just trying to come up with a good cadence for the board here as far as presentation of policies before approval of policies. So kind of right now, we're getting them, and we recognize the difficulty with that, getting them at the same month. So there probably will be a month that we have to double up on some policies in terms of, ones that are up for review. But we'll definitely have that ironed out by that meeting, and look forward to everybody coming to the policy committee.
Wait, we're all coming?
Well, you're
Did you join
welcome.
the committee?
See, I'm not on the committee.
Everybody's on the committee.
No.
Ex officio.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your hard work on that committee. Mr. Perez, would you give us an update on the budget committee?
As well. So Tuesday, January 31st at 5:30 p.m. in this room, we will be having our budget committee or finance committee meeting. This is the beginning of the process of our budget. Our budget will be presented most likely in May, correct? Dr. Robertson, as usual?
You guys voting on an April county commission in May.
And so it's a process, this being the first time that we in my experience in the 2 years I've been here, where we meet together as a committee prior, just to be able to discuss some of the items and hopefully iron out some of the needs for our budget discussions. So.
Great, thank you so much for setting that meeting and doing that work. Mrs. Black, the Discipline Committee, would you like to give us an update?
Yes, the Discipline Committee met recently. We had a really good open discussion and review of what our current approach to discipline and policies are. I haven't set a second meeting for that committee, but it became very apparent that there is a connection between what the state has instructed us to do as far as our approach to discipline. There's a connection between that and our new funding model and TISA and the staff that are needed to properly execute our approach to discipline. And that maybe some of the issues that we're having illustrate, that need gap of like what we've been instructed to do and the approach we're supposed to take, and not having the staff to do it. And I'm excited to come back together and talk about the staff that's needed.
That's great. Okay, and Mrs. Jones, the Facilities Committee.
So we don't have a pending date for Facilities Committee meeting right now. Ms. Black held a meeting with Hamilton County representation at Howard to discuss the Howard Connect situation. So there was discussion there. We have a committee meeting, a community meeting coming up, tentatively, pending securing the location, but tentatively we have a community meeting as it relates to the rezoning for East Ridge and Brainerd on January 30th at 6 p.m. We're hoping to secure Brainerd High School for that, but that's tentative. We have to confirm with Dr. Sorrells because we switched dates. So that's our update. Once we have that meeting, Ms. Black is at her meeting, but once we have that meeting, we'll convene again for a facilities meeting to continue to discuss those issues and begin to discuss how we will bring to the board any recommendations from that, as well as beginning to figure out how to prioritize our facility needs and that information.
Okay. It was Dr. Robertson's meeting, but I was there.
No, honey. According to the community, Ms. Black held a meeting at Howard Connect. I'm just trying to get you accustomed to how this goes. Dr. Robinson was just an accessory. That's how this goes. I mean, that's how it happens. It's the board member that had to meet. But anyway, it was a meeting held.
He talked a whole lot for an accessory.
You know.
Figuring I was taking the heat for a new board member, you know. So.
No, I'm saying. But no, that's what they said. But nevertheless, there was a meeting. Yeah.
Well, in regarding facilities, we have a meeting on the calendar for Saturday, January 28th, and I have not received an agenda for that yet, but I think facilities will be a primary topic with the county commission. So. And that will be held here. No.
It's at Chester Frost
Frost.
Are you
We're going to be
serious?
in the cold at Chester Frost
Okay.
Park on a
Oh,
January Saturday morning.
Yeah. So.
Thank you to the commission for that.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Connor would like to give us an update on the legislative work that he's doing. All right, let's give Mr. Connor a moment to give us an update on the legislative committee.
Yeah, so the part about the legislation, it is about to go in session. We haven't had as many bills as they thought we would have yet presented. They have until Valentine's Day to present all the bills that will be gone through in this session. There are a couple already on there. I'll put together an entire report of what all we have at the February meeting that's necessary for the board. But I also wanted to say about the third grade retention, because we've heard you. I've personally received multiple emails and calls about third grade retention law from concerned parents and from our educators who have their ability to progress in Hamilton County, our Hamilton County students into future-ready graduates that's been handcuffed. So much so that I asked to include a resolution on tonight's agenda, only to find out that Mr. Keene had also already drafted one of his own. But between then and now, and as we are about to talk about as we just said, we have a joint commission board meeting that is going to be attended by Senator Watson and I believe Senator Gardenhire as well. And since they're going to be there, I plan to express what I would have in that resolution, as I'm sure Mr. Keene will, to the senators face to face. If the resolution still needs, then Mr. Keene and I plan to meet in an open meeting and put together a joint resolution that we would present to the board at the next meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for your updates. For events and announcements, we have parent-teacher conferences, January 23rd through March 3rd. Friday, January 27th is the County Commission Legislative Delegation Breakfast. I believe that's at 8:30 at the
The Career Center.
Thank you, the
Chester Frost Park.
Career
No,
Center.
The Career
This is
Center
different.
on Roanoke.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the Career Center at Roanoke. That's right. Yep, across from Orchard Knob Middle School. Yes. Saturday, January 28th, from 8 to 12, we have a work session with the County Commission, and that is likely where we'll be discussing some facility items. Tuesday, January 31st, 5:30 p.m., Finance Committee meeting here in the boardroom.
Yes, but going back to the breakfast, that's at the new Career Center on Roanoke. That's not across from Orchard Knob.
Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Marion
Yes,
Harbor.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Friday, January 27th, I believe that's at 8:30 a.m.
I think it is too. And
Yep,
if you
and
haven't
it's,
already RSVP'd.
so it's at the Construction Career Center.
Yes.
Yes,
If you haven't
8:30.
RSVP'd,
I did
please
not
do
realize
that to
that.
Jennifer.
If you've attended in the past, then it normally is across from Orchard Knob Middle School.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
no, all good. Wednesday, February 1st is a half day for students. Monday, February 6th is off at 5:30 p.m. is the policy committee meeting that Dr. Wingate mentioned. And then please, please, please mark this down on your calendars. Our February board meeting, we will have an executive session at 4 p.m. So please plan to be here at 4 p.m.
Ms. Robinson.
Yeah. All right, and with that, we're adjourned.
Ms. Robinson.
I'm so sorry.
Before we adjourn, so just before you guys leave, we have a small token to start School Board Appreciation Week, which is next week. For you new board members, there's actually a week dedicated to appreciating you guys. I will say on behalf of the school system, teachers, leaders, our senior leadership team, and central office staff, you guys volunteered to do a job that not many people want to do, and you do not get
It's
paid.
a joy every day.
I know it is, Mr. Perez. You guys don't get compensated enough to do what you do, so we appreciate the time and the effort. And each one of you, I know you care deeply about this system, and so we appreciate the work that you're doing. This is a small start to appreciating you over the next week and the coming months ahead, but we did want to publicly mention that next week is School Board Appreciation Week, and we appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Scott, we don't need to-
Yeah.